Okay, so what I'll do is let me do a sort of 5-minute intro or 2-minute introduction of me, and then we'll share the screen and we'll get on to what I'm going to talk about. So good morning, everybody. It's still morning. My name is Phil Fraser. I am a business sounding board. I work with small and medium-sized businesses, with the owners of the business to be exactly that, to be a business sounding board. It's a bit of a cliche, it's lonely at the top. And I'm there just to be an extra pair of ears, a pair of eyes for those who are running their own businesses. Often in business, as the owner of a business, you're expected to have all the answers, and the team look up to you and what we're going to do next, what we're going to do next. And sometimes you either don't know, or you're not sure, or you just need to bounce it around with somebody else before you take the next step. And that's what I do. So think somewhere between business mentor, business coach, sort of personal non-exec director. Johnny mentioned Mr. Online Bingo. My previous company, well, the reason I feel I can help businesses is because I have owned my own business. I started a business back in 2000 with no investment, just myself and my wife, kitchen table, and 18 years later, we sold the business to a PLC. So pretty much been there, done that, got the t-shirt, got the scars, and that's why I feel I can help small businesses or small and medium-sized businesses, business owners, help to run their business. So that's what I do. So if anybody knows an owner of a business who just needs, as I say, a spare pair of ears, a pair of eyes, that's what I do. So feel free to pass on any introductions to me. So Johnny, if you want to share the screen, and we will go through what I'm going to talk about today, which is work prioritization.
You should be able to share.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, that's working.
Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about work prioritization. Now, I'm not selling this as you must do this. I'm not selling this as this is the only system. There are hundreds of work prioritization systems out there. You've probably got your own. This is my system. I found it works for me, and I thought it might be interesting for people to have a listen to this, see what they think, maybe even use it themselves. So the general concept of work prioritization actually usually ends up with opening lots and lots of other aspects, a real can of worms. And it falls, it feeds into things like your own general time management, procrastination. If you've got a team, sort of delegation falls out of this. And the big picture of this often becomes, okay, well, what actually is my focus? What are my goals? What should I be doing? And only when you know all of those sort of things can you actually prioritize what you're doing. And having sort of talked through this with a client of mine recently, what it then does, it then expands into a whole can of worms of job roles and responsibilities. So the first question is, should I be doing this? If the answer is no, then the question is, who else should be doing it? And then, so this whole work prioritization thing does throw up a massive can of worms, but we're just going to talk about work prioritization for now. And then you can, we can maybe do sessions in the future with all the other things that fall out of this. So me personally, I'm a list maker. So I'm one of those people who has a piece of paper on the desk, something comes in, scribble it on the list. Scribble on the list. Now, some people do that digitally. Some people use all sorts of remote stuff. I'm a pen and paper, scribble it down man. What you then end up with, however you do it, is a list of stuff that needs doing. And if you're like me, the stuff that gets done on that stuff, long list of things that need doing, are either the easy things or the quick things or the things you like doing. And the big stuff and the horrible stuff and the hard stuff, you sort of push around your plate like a cold piece of broccoli, and you'd think, well, I'll do it later, or I might not do it, or whatever. So this was my problem, and this is the core of the problem. Everything's a priority, and it's this is what I'm trying to answer. You know, you've got 100 things to do. Which one comes first? Which should I do first? Which is the most important? So the solution I've come up with, or I use personally, is a mix of experience. It's a mix of things I've learned. It's a mix of things I've copied. I've tweaked things. I've mixed it all up, and this is my process. And it's based on two concepts. One is Stephen Covey's important versus urgent concept, and something called Eat the Frog, which I know a few of you have seen me wittering on about on LinkedIn, and it's something I talk about quite a lot. So the first thing, Stephen Covey, fantastic book. This is my go-to business book, 7 Habits of, what is it? 7 Habits of Successful Business People. If you haven't read it, read it. If you want an audio copy of it, drop me an email. I actually have an audio copy of it, very happy to share with you. I've read this book about 5 or 6 times. It's fantastic. Anyway, one of the things that's in there is this. This is the priority matrix. So it's a matrix of urgent versus important. Is this task urgent? Is it important? Now, you've probably seen matrices like this before. You know, what you really should be doing is you should be focusing on quadrant 1. What you shouldn't be doing is the stuff on quadrant 4, which basically you shouldn't be doing at all. What I've done with this is I've sort of converted it into a point system. The second half of my system is Eat the Frog. Now, this quote is from Mark Twain. You may have seen it before. It was then popularized by a guy called Brian Tracy, who is what's called a productivity consultant, whatever one of those is. And the basic concept of this is, obviously, eating frogs is really gross and really horrible. But what it's saying is, if you do that really gross thing, the most gross thing first, then everything else is going to be better during the day. Now, that gross thing might be something that you hate doing, or it might be something that's hugely important. However you visualize that frog, it's either something that's really important, you think, oh God, this is really scary, I don't want to start doing it because it's so important, or it's something you hate doing. And I completed my tax return last week and ended up posting something on LinkedIn about it because that was my frog. Now, bearing in mind that's my tax returns for the end of April 2020, that's how big a frog that was. That's how long that had been pushed around the plate. So, as a general idea, as a summary, so what I do, and I'll run through the general system that I do, and then I'll talk through it step by step. So what I do is I list everything, I score things by importance, I then score things by urgency, I add an extra point if it's a quick job, I create a list, I then eat my frog, and off we go. So let's go through this one at a time. And this actually ends up as a 7-step process, but before that is what I call step 0. So if this is the first time you're doing it, you need to do this first. You only need to do this once. So step 0 is part of the preparation, is importance. So what I do is I create a little grid like this, so I can score tasks by points. And this is a very simple generic system I have here. So if it's a very important task, it scores 5 points, as you can see, all the way down to what I call fluff, which is those little things that, you know, you don't really need to do, but actually you end up doing because they're quite fun and, you know, they're not obligatory and all that sort of stuff. Now, that's a very generic importance grid. You could do it like that. What you could also do it by, you could also score importance by the type of task it is. So I use this when I was running my business. So this is if you imagine, you know, the business owner, team of 12 people, these are my responsibilities. So the strategic side of things is most important for me in that role. Managing the team is next, marketing the business, the financials, which I hated doing, but obviously was obligatory, and a bit of the admin, the other stuff. So you can either do your importance score just by a simple level like this, so just level of importance, or you can do it by type of task and level importance within your role. Now, if you're part of a big team, these sort of different levels of importance will be determined by your role. If it's your own business, I think it's probably just going to be this. It's just going to be importance because you end up doing everything. Okay. The second grid you need to create is an urgency grid. Now, this is based on the concept of doing everything on a Monday morning. So is it so urgent it needs doing today? Could it possibly be done tomorrow? Does it need to be done by the end of this week? Could it be done by next week? Is it something that actually hasn't got a time frame on it and there it's whenever? One of the things that drops out of this, and I often say this to people, is really how urgent is what you're doing. Because most of the time, you will, although you'll think it's urgent, it actually isn't that urgent. So you'll realize that, but also you might say something on, if you do this, let's say you did this on Monday morning, you've got a task that ends up with 2 points this Monday because it's next week. When you do this again next week, you do it next Monday, obviously it gets 3 points because it's this week. So we've now created an importance grid and an urgency grid. Okay. A few tips. What I will do is, so I'm a pen and paper person. And what we're going to do is going to create a list and mark things by points. So this is the process. This is the actual process we're talking about. So step one is brain dump everything onto a piece of paper or type it out or whatever you want to do. Absolutely everything. And what I often find I'm doing is actually I put work stuff in there and I actually put home stuff in there, because sometimes the home stuff needs doing and you forget to do it. So actually I mix the two. You can either do it as work or you can do it as home, or you can do two separate things. You can do this process for all the jobs. Let's be really sexist here. All the jobs that your wife's given you to do and you haven't done, you can do this process with as well. So step one, huge brain dump. Once you've got everything on a piece of paper, and there's no order to it, it's just everything you've got, dump it on a piece of paper. Step two, you then go down that list. So you take your importance chart. If we just go back a couple of stages. So we take our importance chart and we go down the list and we give each task on that list a point or a point score for importance. Okay? Guess what step three is? Step three, we go down the list again and we score it by urgency. Now, I'll give you a tip here that I do is I actually do this with two different colored pens because that's the way I think. So your list will now have, at this point, you've got a list of all your jobs. They've got a score in, let's say, blue for important, and they've got a score, let's say, in red for urgency. Okay, so you at this point you now have two numbers. Sorry, somebody's not on mute. We've got two numbers next to your tasks. Step four, I then add an extra bonus point for a task that will take less than 5 minutes to do. And again, probably do this in a different color. The reason I do this is, and this works on my psychology, is actually getting things ticked off that list is quite a nice thing. So actually, it might not be important, it might not be urgent, but actually because it's done quick, great, I've ticked something off the list. Okay, so you now have a list of, you have a sheet with, some of the tasks will have two numbers next to them, some will have three next to them. Your next task, and this is the most difficult bit for most people, you have to do the maths. So for each task, you have to add up the importance number, the urgency number, and if there's a bonus point, it's a bonus point number. Tip for me, what I tend to do with this is I will write the total number in a circle and then cross out the points I've scored for importance, just to keep things simple. So you've now got your brain dump list with every task has a total score next to it. Next thing to do, grab another piece of paper. And what we're going to do is very, very simply put that list in a points order from top to bottom, from the biggest to the smallest. Okay, very, very straightforward. Now, a couple of tips again for you for this. You will often find that certain tasks or a few tasks have got the same total. Now, I use importance as goal difference on this. So if you've got a task with 2 tasks with 6 points, and one of them is a 4 on importance and a 2 on urgency, and the other one is a 3 on importance and a 3 on urgency, and they've both got 6 points, the one that's more important will go to the top. If you have stuff that's maybe got 4 or 5 tasks that are both 3 and 3, put them in whatever order you want. It really doesn't matter. So at this point, you now have a piece of paper with a list of tasks on it. You don't need to put, just as a note, you don't need to put the point score on this order list. You've now got a list from top to bottom. On that list, you will probably see a task, and inevitably it will be near the top of the list, that you look at and you think, that's the one I really don't want to do. You will know your frog because it will be looking at you on that list. It will inevitably be near the top. So to start your day, you take your list, and the first thing you do is you eat the frog. You do the job. It might not be the job at the top of the list. Inevitably, I would guess it will be somewhere in that top 5, because it will either be the importance that's making it a frog, or it's the urgency that's making it a frog. And the first, so you now have a list of all your tasks. There's a frog looking at you. That's the one you do first. Once you've eaten your frog, you start at the top and you go down, because the jobs at the top of that list are either very important or very urgent, or very important and very urgent. Now, I would hope if you're doing this on a regular basis, things that are important won't be urgent, because you'll be doing this on a regular basis. But what this does is this focuses you on doing the stuff that matters, the stuff that adds value to your business. Now, it might be once you've eaten your frog, you might end up doing task number 2, then task number 4, then task number 1, then task number 5. It doesn't actually matter if you don't do them exactly 1 to 100. But what it means is you are focusing your time on anything in 1 to 5. You're focusing your time on stuff that's going to add value. It means you're definitely not doing stuff that's task 56, 57, 58, or 59, because they are not important, and they are not urgent, and they are not quick. So that's my 7-step system. I hope that all made sense. If you want to read it, all the stuff I've just talked about, it is there at that URL, philfraser.co.uk/work-prioritization. If you want to contact me, you can contact me in all those different places. Do not go to philfraser.com, because that's a medieval reenactment company. That's not me. And you have to search for me on YouTube, because if you just put Phil Fraser in, it looks like somebody who's Thai, who's doing a video blog on there, and quite obviously that isn't me either. So who has the first question? If you want to, Johnny, do you want to take everybody off mute and go back to gallery view, and we can answer any questions anybody's got?
That's brilliant. Yeah, if you stop sharing, Phil, then that would be good. If anyone's got any questions, so I'll start. I'll just going to keep these questions to just 4 or 5 minutes. I'll just give you a quick question. How often do you re-rank your tasks?
I would normally do this on a weekly basis. Conceptually, it's a Monday morning job.
Yeah.
But you can do this whenever you want. By Wednesday afternoon, you've got 10 more jobs on your brain dump list, so you might have to redo it. But generally, I do this on a Monday morning.
I love how it's got psychology in it.
That's by accident. It's just the way it works. I'm not a psychologist in any shape or form.
Anyone got any questions for Phil at all? Steve, go for it.
It's not really a question, but it's an observation that I think's very good about that, because when you're working for various clients, you have those ones who'll send a job in and then they'll be on the phone chasing for it and they want it back there and then you've got those clients who'll give you a job but they'll never really chase it, or